Hi, welcome back to the Political Beat at lfpress.com. I'm Pat, this is Chip. We cover City Hall and various and sundry things related to it for the London Free Press and lfpress.com. And Chip, a really good story this week that neither you nor I wrote was by our casual acquaintance Norman DeBono.
Yeah, good kid, good kid.
Nice person,
yeah,
nice person.
Good
who
kid.
wrote about Joe Swan, Orchestra London, and that organization's need to raise money, and the Ward 3 councillors' efforts to raise that money by going out and speaking with developers, and whether or not that's a conflict in his role.
I think the money is for a study to help them determine the need for what size of performing arts centre, where it might be, that sort of thing. I think the orchestra's talked about wanting $10 million from the city for the actual centre, but now they're looking for money to study it.
That's right, and that sort of the questions that were raised in Norm's very interesting story were, is this a conflict? And do you think that there is a conflict there?
Well, it looks like it. It looks like it. I mean, he's an employee of the orchestra. He's the executive director. That's the title, I think, Patrick?
Yeah.
And he's out there and he's approaching business interests in the community, developers included. And I think the story, Norm's story, talked about Vito Frisia with Southside Construction, or Southside Group. And this is a fairly large developer. Joe is also chair of the proper name of that committee always escapes me.
Investment Economic
Prosperity Committee that is looking at development proposals and that sort of stuff in the Southwest and elsewhere, and there's some possibilities here that it just looks like it might have potential.
It doesn't look right, I guess, but it raises an interesting issue, a larger issue. When are you not Councillor X? When are you not? Like if you take your car to get it fixed by Bud, is he just Bud Polhill or is he Councillor Polhill? I think that you could easily make the argument that you're always playing that role. You're always in that position. You're always a politician.
Yeah, you are, and there's certain things that you pay the price as a result of it. You loss of privacy, all sorts of things like that. Criticism in the media, of course, that sort of thing. It's all part and parcel of being a politician. But Joe Swan is one of the most experienced politicians in terms of years served on city council, and one would have thought the appearances of this he would assess before he engaged in some of this activity.
Yeah, I really wonder if we'll talk about the Performing Arts Center. They've been talking about building one of these for years and years. It's been on and off, but it seems like it's more on now than it ever has been before. Do you think we're actually going to get one of these?
No, I don't think so. I think when it all comes down to it, the cost. Let's put it this way: if there's a significant cost to the city, to taxpayers, I still don't think it's going to happen.
And the Grand Theatre's proposal, which is counter to, or in competition, I guess, with Orchestra London's proposal, is not asking for any cash.
No, but they're looking for a parking lot that's valued at around $2 million that the city owns and would lose some revenue as a result of that as well, in order to do a land swap so that they could do an expansion at their property where the Grand Theatre is. Less costly for taxpayers. It has a lot going for it. Obviously, Orchestra London has a plan for, I think, a $40 or $50 million building.
Something to that effect, yeah. And I see the merit of the argument. Like I don't think that I know I've never been to the orchestra. I'm not sure that I ever would go, but I hear the argument. Great cities have great orchestras, and I guess I see the value of that. I'm not sure though that it's necessarily top of the priority list at this point in a city like this, but maybe that's exactly the attitude that's kept the city in a position like this.
8.5% unemployment rate. We need a vision of what the city's going to be. Are we a great city yet, Pat? I don't know. I've been to the orchestra. My family and I, we used to go, and we worked our way right up to I think it was the children's concerts or the Genes and Classics or what it was. We worked our way right up to the front row, and then they canceled that particular program. But we did enjoy the orchestra. I do enjoy music.
I should try it out. The budget is nearing closer and closer to completion. We're about 2 weeks away from it being done. This week they got it down to 1.2%, but further to what we were just discussing, economic prosperity projects, there was $2.5 million in basically new money that the city had from tax-based growth. Staff said put that money toward economic prosperity projects. Politicians, including Joe Swan and the mayor, said no, we'll put it toward taxes. And I think what we have here are two
Competing visions.
Yeah, two competing visions. We got holding the line on taxes, growing the city, and that was a pretty clear clash right with that 2.5
million. And we've said here at earlier sessions of our little dog and pony show that it wasn't going to be it was going to be difficult to get a tax freeze when they had all these tens of millions of dollars worth of economic prosperity projects. Well, how did they resolve that this week? All those projects, they invited Londoners to come forward. They had 49 they assessed. They made a short list of 5 or 6.
5 of them, yeah.
And in fact, they've said, okay, well, we won't do it this year after all. We'll just put it off to next year. I would think a lot of people that came forward and took part in that process might be rather disappointed to realize that not a nickel of that is going to be spent this year, and that obviously no jobs will result.
Yeah, and I'm actually working on a story now about the reaction in the business community, and I think there's a pretty clear perception, and the mayor and Councillor Swan would tell you it's a misperception, but they do understand where it's coming from, that these projects are stalled, that there is no momentum, that there is no sense of urgency. There's a stated goal on council to kickstart job creation and the economy, but to say it is one thing, to do it is another, and we'll get around to it in a year is sort of a...
Yeah, there's a lot of talking of the talk and not a lot of walking of the walk.
Yeah, and I think in particular to take that 2.5 million and not put it away and say, okay, now we've got this available, which is what staff had wanted, the politicians instead put it toward clearing the path toward a tax freeze. To me, a very clear example, maybe the clearest example yet of the two prongs of the mayor's push clashing together.
They may get to the 0% the way things are panning out now, but we will also not see any of this economic prosperity plan in place or even begun this year.
And even if we do, there's no money available to get it started,
That's
which
right.
is something that Councillor, and that's part of the story that I'm working on too, is Councillor Swan's trying to find where is this money going to in fact come from. And there's a few options available, but one that's hanging out there is the $70 million note from London Hydro, which I guess I don't know the origins of it. I just know that basically the city has a $70 million IOU that they could sell, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it seems to me that if you're looking for fast money and you're not... And I mean, I would say that this is a council that isn't known necessarily for thinking long term. If you're looking for an immediate solution to a problem that you have, that thing is just begging to be cashed in.
I suppose. I mean, the city is the sole shareholder of London Hydro, and there's quite a valuable asset there. On the other hand, there's how much revenue comes from Hydro every year? It's in the millions of dollars.
Yeah.
4.5 or something.
That note in particular, it's 4.3 or something. It's 1% on the tax bill.
Yeah, 1% on the tax bill. We've been counting on. So if you sell it off, you might get a large infusion of cash. What do you do with that? And you lose 1% on the tax bill right off the top. So it's an asset. It's something they have to decide what to do with at some point. Whether they do it in the near term or the long term,
I just think if you're looking for $60 million for these prosperity projects, you got a $70 million note. 2 + 2 = 4. You know, you sort of can just... I can see it. I could see that happening. I would be tempted. I would be very tempted.
People get possessive about their utilities. They get possessive about their services, just like they get possessive about, a lot of things in a community, and they don't want to relinquish control, because then it can go to multinational corporations, and we've seen when their agendas conflict with those of a community, we know who loses.
Yeah,
and that's why we have a large unemployment rate right now.
And I will say too that this week I was at a public input meeting for the budget, and to be frank, sometimes those can be excruciating to sit through, because there are a large number of people who are maybe uninformed, ill-informed, or have sort of an oddball, skewed view of things. I was really impressed, and normally I am not at these things, but I was really impressed this week. There were 36 people spoke. All but maybe 2 or 3 of them were really informed, really sophisticated, respectful of the politicians, even the ones that they clearly disagree with. I was really, really impressed by what I saw.
Isn't that ironic in light of that recent survey we talked about last week, where people didn't even know what municipal services are provided to them, and a large proportion of people living in the City of London felt they hadn't taken advantage of any city service in the last year, which prompted me to ask if they'd ever flushed a toilet.
Right,
anyway.
yeah. But I did sort of... To me, the people who were there really were a great representation of, I don't know that it's a growing group, but it's certainly a vibrant group of people who understand the basics of City Hall and are really interested in playing a role there.
And wouldn't it be nice if they ran for office?
Some of them certainly,
and could be members of a new council going forward.
In fact, there were a few people in the chamber I noticed who I have already heard from who are interested in running in 2014, so it's interesting.
Well,
people are already sort of trying to... what's the word I'm looking for? Position
Position themselves.
Isn't that so interesting that it would start so fast? But
Yeah.
I guess a year will
As they
pass.
say, the conversation has started.
Yeah, the conversation has started. And I will also point out that, so 36 people made comments about the budget, several of them talking about cuts that council has already rejected, but not one person brought up the sort of tightened spending on police and fire, which suggested to me that maybe people aren't quite as upset about that as police and fire might like you to believe that they would be.
So you're saying that they're prepared to see cuts to police spending and to fire spending?
Yeah, I wonder.
And so these people would not be members of the Orser Chorus?
The Orser Chorus, yeah. Orser Chorus, who has said, basically give them whatever they want.
Whatever they want. They have badges and they have uniforms. Whatever they want.
And I really think that the mayor deserves some credit. The mayor, whose father was a police officer in Italy before he moved to Ontario, deserves some credit for standing up and saying, and I think his quote was, "I know how hard it is to say no to the police." He gets no credit for it, and that's because of some various and sundry other issues that are hanging over his head. But they said no to the police, and they tightened the reins on them, and I don't see a lot of public outcry about that. So
no, and even the chief seemed to accept it as could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, and I just think that any bureaucracy will only find efficiencies when you start to
turn up the heat.
Well, clamp down a little bit. Sure. Anyway, so well, thanks, Chip, for this, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Pat.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure.
As always.
Trust me.
And we'll see you next time here at elefpress.com.